I teach courses about race in the U.S. and about, at this point, global sort of white supremacy. And also, my focus is always on how to build intentional communities. I read Ken's email about what to do today, and what he said was talk about what popular education means, right, to us. And I think the best way I can do it is actually to tell you why it's important to me. And in that sense, a little bit of my own education. That's the best way I can tell you how I came upon it. So because of the distraction of my head and the tiredness, I decided to write it down. It makes it actually faster. I grew up in a British colony and got a colonial education in which I was told that my home language was useless, that learning English was the answer to everything, and I knew more names of English kings than I ever knew about the violence of Western colonization in my country that landed my family along with thousands of others as refugees in that British colony. The colonial education I got was what Paulo Freire's banking model of education, somebody already mentioned that, you know, where the top of your head is taken off and informational alphabet soup is poured in, and then the proof of the learning is how well the recipients of the soup can kind of recite the informational alphabet. Two things were very missing. Application of that learning was not part of the equation. And then also absent was the notion that there was something about education that should be of the heart, of compassion. In domestic science class, every little girl had to take domestic science, and we baked scones, you know, those things called scones, in British-made electric ovens. And hundreds of little girls went home to kitchens that consisted of a tiny kerosene stove. And to families who had never heard of flour, butter, sugar, and eggs. And besides, where the heck would you go to buy these, even if you had the money? But many of the little girls were not angry at the teachers with the scones, but more angry at our unsympathetic parents. As an adult immigrant in the US, the bit of education I got was not that different. The US presidents were substituted for the English kings, of course. But I also learned that people like me, who looked like me, could not possibly belong or be normal here, since we were never to be seen or heard of in US history, in the news, in any discussions of peoples of the United States. So I learned to teach outside of the formal classroom. It was a long, long while after I got here before I got into some formal classroom. I was trying to teach ESL and advocating for bilingual ed for immigrant kids in a couple of storefronts in Boston, Chinatown, in the wake of the 1965 Immigration Act. And when I first started teaching and advocating, I imitated the methods that I had gotten when I grew up. That was all I knew. I tried my own version of pouring alphabet soup into heads, but this time I also saw the utter disdain, if not hate, in my students' eyes. What the heck are you doing here, eyes? And I had no way of making sense, let alone using what you're talking about, eyes. Those eyes were my parents' eyes when I asked about baking scones on the kerosene stove many years ago. So began my own education in the pedagogy of the oppressed and pedagogy of hope. Those are my names for popular education. I learned to teach by the painful unpacking of the internalized oppression that years of colonizing formal education had placed in me. And what helped me most was listening to the hundreds of stories of my first generation immigrant students and teaching and working along with them in their communities. That's how I shaped my own teaching methods. I learned that people only hear answers to their own desperate questions, not ours, no matter how insightful or crafted we put it out. I learned that I could not know their desperate questions until I sat and listened to their stories, as in, tell me your story. Tell me what you need and want, but tell me your story. I learned that when we listen to our stories together in ways that say they matter, inevitably, the learning leads to seeing the structures of power that shape our lives. It also leads to learning that the wisdoms that we have are born out of our own survivals. Stories reveal our histories, our present, and the blueprints of our potential futures. I learned that we can't work towards something without a vision, but someone else's vision given to us falls apart in practice because they cannot take into account our realities. So you cannot bake scones on the kerosene stove, but you can cook a damn good dinner with rice and greens for a family of 4. So then came university teaching after years not doing it, and in the formal classrooms that I think oftentimes do drown us with alphabet soup, and also can imprison us because more and more the formal education, at least in the undergraduate education pieces of it, it feels harder and harder to be able to actually connect or to have a university value the connection, to base that education in the communities that we have to live in, or where our people live in. So what I realized starting teaching in university is that we must dismantle the rules, some of the rules of these formal classrooms. And that my students' growth of compassion is going to depend on telling and hearing their own stories, owning their own histories, and seeing the structures and how they resist, right? I learned that they and I do, if we don't find ways to practice what we learn by working with and among people and communities that we want to serve, the abstractions from that formal classroom will fade with the speed of light. It is the actual working on the ground in a community, in our communities, that's the praxis of the theory and praxis. That's, I think, what makes for real transformative education. You go into something with one way of knowing, and then along the way you change not just what you know, but how you know, right? Based on understanding your own and others' histories and realities, and bearing witness and documenting that change. And that, of course, once we start documenting, that is the theory of theory and practice. It just goes around and on and on. So instead of opening up the head and pouring in the alphabet soup, the metaphor that I've come to use for popular education is one that doesn't start at the head, but at the feet, that looks at the ground that we stand on. We learn about the soil for a tree or the forest to grow. We work on the conditions of the soil, the seeding, the fertilizing, the watering of the soil, and we all come together to do that. That is why I think it's the teacher is student and student is teacher. There's no separation. Our stories interweave. You know, we learn from our stories and from seeing the structures that shape all of our lives. We can't make a plant or a forest grow by pulling on the leaves or pulling on them. We tend to the soil, and they do their own growth.
I wanted to share how what my experience has been like going through programs or classes that focuses on popular education, and how my experience through it affects how I look at community-based work at the Chinese Progressive Association. So I've been thinking a lot about how I come to where I am now. Also I'm a student of Professor Wu, and I think a lot of the transformative changes or the things that I've learned about popular education really comes from Professor Wu's teaching. During my last semester at Tufts, I was able to participate in a research class where I asked what we wanted to know the most about ourselves, and at the time I wanted to do a project about my family history. Through this project, I was documenting my daily interactions, how I was feeling, trying to notice my patterns of behavior every day. And then that's when I noticed that a lot of these feelings and emotions I have every day comes from a deeper place in me that I never had a chance to talk about, or never in like a traditional academic setting that I would be able to have access to. And what I meant was that, so in my project tracing back my own personal history, I thought back to the time when I was 12, when I first came to the United States as an immigrant child, and a lot of the how immigration affected me as a person, and how I experienced a lot of the isolation and exclusion growing up in the U.S., living in a very isolated suburban area, and also seeing my parents as restaurant workers, how they're being exploited at restaurants, in their workplace. These are the things that I actually, before that class, I never never thought that those were relevant to who I am today. It informs so much to how I interact with the world today in certain situations, why I would like feel anxious, nervous, or like have so much fear in me. I never engaged with those feelings until in that class I was able to focus really on my own personal experience and connecting my own experience and all these feelings and thinking about my own parents' experiences and connecting it back to what I know now about immigration policy and drawing these connections inform me so much about what immigration, for example, or like these structural processes are like. And this is so much, this kind of me going back to my own experience and learning them, that kind of meaning making and understanding that experience is such powerful knowledge to me now that no textbooks or no other kind of facts or articles can teach me about what immigration is or what these experiences are like. The training really gave me a lot of tools that I think are very helpful to how I think about using the knowledge I have now, coming from my own experience, and then using these tools to work in an organization like Chinese Progressive Association, which is a Chinatown-based grassroots community building organization. And I learned a lot about active listening to what people want to say, and also how to ask questions. I do a lot of direct services work. So people in the community come to our service hours, and it's a wide range of different things. These Chinese immigrants, a lot of them, because of language barrier or not English speakers, they need help with that, reading letters or like translation and interpretation. And being at the organization, I get to access that part of the bilingual part in me that I never thought could be so useful. But I'm also learning so much from these people who come to the services, because I learned so much about what are the issues or what are the things that are actually going on in the community. And I'm also part of the Worker Center at CPA. And at the Worker Center, the mission is to work with workers so that they find power in organizing amongst themselves, and then to fight for better working conditions. Sometimes like the immediate goals for these workers are like to fight for better contract or like to fight for severance pay. But at the end of the day, it's not really most transformative is not to get a better contract, but it's the opportunity for these people to be able to realize the power in themselves and that they're their own agents of change, and the power in the workers together. There's this group of home care workers at CPA that we're organizing with, and I heard stories from these workers how the management people used to treat them like so harshly, used to yell at them, or like used to like ignore their needs. They could just be like, they don't speak English, they won't like complain, or like these Chinese immigrants, they, kind of like looking down on these people and what they could do. But when these workers come together and at CPA or talk about and strategize how they want to push for a pay raise or a better contract, and then later on, because the management see the power of these workers uniting together, and it's because these people have transformed and have learned about the power in themselves. And I think this is also what I've been thinking a lot about, what popular education